The amber glow of Rakshanafo's twin suns filtered through the dense canopy of the ancient forest, casting dancing shadows across the forward base camp. Captain Mara Ellis adjusted her tactical tablet, reviewing the day's mission parameters, while the sounds of the alien wilderness echoed around her. The year 2387 had brought humanity farther into the galaxy than their ancestors could have ever imagined, and now they stood on the precipice of yet another world, ready to harvest its secrets. The outpost sat precariously close to the edge of the primordial forest, where the apex predators, known as Draconis, ruled supreme. These magnificent creatures, resembling a fusion of dragon and serpent, had evolved over millions of years to dominate every aspect of their ecosystem. Their scales shimmered with an iridescent quality that suggested both beauty and danger, while their razor-sharp claws and teeth marked them as the undisputed kings of Rakshanafo's food chain. Mara had been tasked with leading the Interplanetary Ecological Survey team, a responsibility that weighed heavily on her shoulders. The mission briefing had been clear: collect DNA samples from the Draconis for a new biological weapons project. It was a delicate operation that required precision, patience, and above all, respect for the natural balance of this untouched world. As evening approached, she made her way through the bustling camp, nodding to various team members as they completed their daily tasks. The air was thick with humidity, and the exotic sense of alien flora creating an atmosphere that was both intoxicating and intimidating. She paused near the main shelter, listening to the distant roars of Draconis echoing through the forest, a sound that never failed to send a chill down her spine. Her contemplation was interrupted by an unusual aroma wafting from the direction of the mess area. It was savory, rich, and entirely unexpected in this remote location. Following her nose, Mara rounded the corner of the equipment storage unit and stopped dead in her tracks. There, in the center of a makeshift barbecue setup, was Engineer Tall, cheerfully tending to what appeared to be massive steaks sizzling over an open flame. But these weren't ordinary steaks. The meat was dark purple with veins of silver running through it, and the smell was unlike anything she had encountered before. A small group of team members sat around the improvised dining area, chatting animatedly and holding plates of the mysterious meat. Captain Ellis, Tall, called out, waving a large spatula in her direction. "Perfect timing. Come join us for dinner. You won't believe how amazing this tastes." Mara approached slowly, her scientific mind racing to process what she was seeing. "Tall, what exactly are you cooking there?" "Draconis steak," he replied with enthusiasm, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Found a freshly deceased one, about 2 kilometers into the forest this morning. Probably died in a territorial dispute. Figured it would be a shame to let all that prime meat go to waste." The captain felt her stomach drop. "You're eating Draconis?" "Oh, come on, Mara," interjected Captain Vance, one of her most trusted colleagues, from his seat at the makeshift table. "Don't tell me you're getting squeamish about a little exotic cuisine. This stuff is incredible. Tastes like a cross between the finest Wagyu beef and something completely otherworldly." Mara watched in disbelief as her team members casually consumed portions of what was essentially the apex predator of an entire planet. The conversations flowed freely, with team members comparing the flavor to various Earth delicacies and debating the best way to prepare the meat. Someone had even managed to create a crude seasoning blend using local herbs. She began, struggling to find the right words. "This seems ethically questionable, doesn't it? I mean, we're talking about the dominant predator of this ecosystem." Tall laughed, taking another bite of his portion. "Look, Captain, these things are at the top of the food chain, right? That means they're the strongest, the most successful. In my book, that makes them the most worthy prey. It's almost like a compliment to eat something so magnificent." Dr. Hana Ri, the team's xenobiologist, looked up from her plate with a thoughtful expression. "From a purely nutritional standpoint, the protein composition is remarkable. The muscle density and amino acid profile are unlike anything we've cataloged. But I have to admit there's something unsettling about consuming the apex predator of an entire planet. As the evening progressed, Mara found herself caught in an internal struggle. The casual nature with which her team treated this situation conflicted deeply with her training in ecological preservation. She had spent years studying the delicate balance of ecosystems, and the idea of casually consuming the keystone species of Raction 4 felt profoundly wrong. The next morning brought a new challenge. Mara had received updated orders that made the DNA collection even more critical than before. The biological weapons program had accelerated its timeline, and failure to deliver the samples could result in the mission being classified as a failure. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her as she prepared the collection equipment. During the previous evening's festivities, in a moment of conflicted judgment, she had secretly added several DNA samples to the cooking pot, thinking it might be a way to fulfill her mission while allowing the team to continue their unusual feast. Now, faced with the morning's urgent requirements, she realized her mistake. The samples were gone, dissolved into the meal that her colleagues had so enthusiastically consumed. Standing in her tent reviewing the mission parameters for the 100th time, Mara felt the full weight of her predicament. She needed to recover those samples, or find a way to extract new ones, without alerting her superiors to the team's culinary adventure. The thought of having to explain that critical DNA samples had been consumed in a barbecue was beyond mortifying. She spent the morning discreetly questioning team members about the previous night's meal, trying to determine if there was any way to recover the genetic material. Dr. Ree offered some hope, suggesting that trace elements might still be detectable in certain circumstances, but the process would be complex and time-consuming. As the day wore on, the team prepared for another expedition into the forest to search for fresh Draconis specimens. The enthusiasm for both the mission and the potential for another exotic meal was palpable among the crew. Mara found herself torn between her duty to the mission and a growing sense of unease about their impact on the local ecosystem. It was during the afternoon briefing that the first signs of trouble appeared. Long-range sensors detected unusual movement patterns in the forest. The Draconis, normally solitary creatures that maintained vast territories, seemed to be gathering in numbers unprecedented in the team's observations. "Captain," reported the communications officer, "we're detecting at least 15 distinct Draconi signatures moving toward our location. This is highly unusual behavior for the species." Dr. Ree frowned at the data on her tablet. "This doesn't match any of the behavioral patterns we've documented. Draconis are fiercely territorial. For this many to be moving together—" Her words were cut off by a distant roar that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. Then another, and another, until the air itself seemed to vibrate with the sound of approaching predators. The team members who had been casually discussing dinner plans suddenly grew very quiet. "All personnel to defensive positions." Mara ordered her training taking over, despite the growing dread in her stomach. "This is not a drill." As the team scrambled to implement their emergency protocols, the truth began to dawn on everyone present. The smell of cooked Draconis meat, so appealing to human senses, might have been far more significant to the native creatures than anyone had anticipated. The casual barbecue that had seemed like harmless fun was now looking like a potentially catastrophic mistake. The first Draconis emerged from the tree line like a nightmare-given form. Standing nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulder, its scales reflected the fading sunlight in an almost hypnotic pattern. Its eyes, ancient and intelligent, seemed to burn with a cold fury as it surveyed the human encampment. Behind it, more shapes moved through the shadows of the forest. "Jesus," whispered Toll, his earlier enthusiasm for exotic cuisine completely forgotten. "How many of them are there?" The answer came in the form of a cacophony of roars as the entire pack revealed themselves. Over 20 of the massive predators had surrounded the camp, their movements coordinated and purposeful. These were not random encounters or territorial disputes. This was a deliberate response to what the humans had unknowingly done. Mara's mind raced as she tried to process the situation. In all their ecological surveys, nothing had suggested that Draconis were capable of this level of coordination. Yet here, they were working together with a unity of purpose that suggested their social structure was far more complex than anyone had realized. "The meat," Dr. Ree said suddenly, her voice barely audible over the sound of approaching predators. "They can smell the meat. We didn't just eat their apex predator. We announced it to the entire forest." The realization hit the team like a physical blow. The casual barbecue that had seemed like a celebration of human ingenuity and adaptability had instead been a declaration of war against the planet's most dangerous inhabitants. The Draconis weren't just defending territory. They were responding to what they perceived as a direct challenge to their species' dominance. The first attack came without warning. A Draconis on the eastern perimeter of the camp launched itself forward with impossible speed for a creature of its size. The emergency barriers held but barely as massive claws raked across the reinforced materials designed to withstand small arms fire, not the assault of a creature that had evolved to be the ultimate predator. "Return fire! Return fire!" Mara shouted. But she knew their weapons were designed for capturing specimens, not fighting a coordinated assault by an entire pack of apex predators. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and she could see the fear in her team members' eyes as they realized how unprepared they were for this scenario. Tall fumbled with his sidearm, his hands shaking as he tried to remember his combat training. "Captain, what do we do? The barriers won't hold much longer." Another Draconis struck from the north, its massive head slamming into the barrier with such force that the entire structure shifted. Cracks appeared in the reinforced material, spider webbing outward from the point of impact. The systematic nature of the attack suggested these creatures were far more intelligent than anyone had given them credit for. In the chaos of the moment, Mara made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her career. Rushing to the equipment storage, she grabbed the biological weapon prototype that had been intended for testing once they returned to base. It was an experimental toxin designed specifically to target Draconis physiology, but it had never been tested in field conditions. "Everyone take cover," she shouted, loading the weapon system with the original DNA samples she had collected before the previous night's feast. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to use the very samples she had tried to hide to save the team from the consequences of their actions. The weapon discharged with a hissing sound, releasing an aerosol cloud of genetically targeted toxins into the air around the camp. The effect was almost immediate. The attacking Draconis stumbled their coordinated assault, breaking apart as the toxin disrupted their nervous systems. One by one, the magnificent creatures collapsed, their bodies paralyzed, but their eyes still burning with that ancient intelligence. The silence that followed was deafening. 23 of Rakshanfi's apex predators lay motionless around the camp, victims of humanity's technological superiority and ethical blindness. The team members slowly emerged from their defensive positions, staring in horror at the scene around them. "My God," Dr. Ree whispered, kneeling beside one of the fallen creatures. "Look at their eyes. They're still aware, still watching us." The psychological storm that followed was inevitable. As the immediate danger passed, the full weight of what had transpired began to sink in. The casual barbecue that had started as a moment of carefree experimentation had led directly to the paralysis of nearly 24 apex predators. The team members who had so enthusiastically consumed Draconis meat now looked sick at the sight of their motionless forms. "We did this," Captain Vance said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Our feast brought them here. We might as well have sent them an invitation written in the blood of their own kind." Tall sat heavily on a supply crate, his head in his hands. "I thought it was just meat, just protein. I never thought about what it might mean to them." As the team began the somber task of documenting the incident, Mara felt the full weight of command settling on her shoulders. She had to file a report that would somehow explain how a routine DNA collection mission had turned into an ecological disaster. The biological weapon had saved their lives, but at what cost? The return journey to the command station was conducted in complete silence. Each team member was lost in their own thoughts, processing the events of the past few days. The Draconis specimens they carried, both the DNA samples and the unfortunate victims of their defense, served as constant reminders of how quickly a situation could spiral out of control. Upon arrival at the command station, Mara faced the most difficult briefing of her career. Standing before the mission commanders, she had to explain how a simple, scientific expedition had resulted in the mass incapacitation of an apex predator species. The recording of the barbecue, which Tal had taken as a light-hearted memento, now served as evidence of the chain of events that had led to the crisis. Captain Ellis, the station commander, said after reviewing the footage, "Help me understand how trained scientists thought it was appropriate to consume the apex predator of an alien ecosystem." Mara struggled to find words that could adequately explain the casual attitude that had pervaded the team. "Sir, I believe we underestimated the significance of our actions. The team saw it as an opportunity to experience the local ecosystem in a unique way. We failed to consider the broader implications." The debriefing continued for hours, with each team member providing their perspective on the events. Dr. Ree's analysis proved particularly valuable, as she had documented the unusual social behavior exhibited by the Draconis. Her findings suggested that these creatures possessed a far more complex society than previously understood, one where the death of a member could trigger coordinated responses from across vast territories. In the end, Mara's final report became a case study in the importance of ecological ethics in interplanetary exploration. She recommended immediate policy changes regarding the harvesting and consumption of native species, emphasizing the need for greater respect for indigenous ecosystems. The incident had demonstrated that humanity's technological superior could not excuse a fundamental disregard for the life forms they encountered. The photograph from the barbecue, once a symbol of human adaptability and camaraderie, was preserved in the mission archives as a reminder of the consequences of ethical blindness. It served as a stark warning for future expeditions about the importance of understanding not just the biological aspects of alien species, but their social and cultural significance as well. Months later, as Mara reviewed requests for new expedition authorizations, she would often pause at the photograph. The smiling faces of her team members, casually consuming what they saw as exotic meat, served as a constant reminder of how quickly good intentions could lead to unintended consequences. The Draconis had eventually recovered from the paralytic toxin, but the scars on both species, human and alien, would persist far longer. The policy changes that followed were comprehensive. No longer could expedition teams casually harvest local wildlife for consumption. Strict protocols were established for any interaction with native species, particularly apex predators. The Raction Protocols, as they came to be known, required extensive ecological and social assessment before any biological material could be collected or consumed. Yet, despite all the regulations and protocols that emerged from the incident, Mara knew that the real lesson was simpler and more fundamental. Respect for life, all life, could not be legislated or mandated through policy. It had to be understood on a deeper level, integrated into the very culture of human exploration. As she prepared for her next assignment, this time to a world where no complex life forms were known to exist, Mara carried with her the weight of that lesson. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but humanity's place in it required humility, respect, and a recognition that their technological capabilities came with corresponding ethical responsibilities. The Draconis of Raxion IV continued to thrive in their forest home, their social structures more complex and fascinating than any human had imagined. And somewhere in the mission archives, a photograph of a barbecue served as a permanent reminder that even the smallest actions could have profound consequences when taken in ignorance of the larger web of life that connected all living things.